Aneesh, Barai, and Emma Cooper, and they're gonna talk about Storyland, designing storytelling experiences in VR for children. Shortly about the speakers, Dr. Aneesh is a lecturer in educational and digital literacies with a specialism in children's media and culture. He has been teaching at universities across UK for the past 10 years and is editor for academic journal Jeunesse, Young People, Text Cultures. He's an interdisciplinary researcher in education and literature, researching youth, cultures and literacy, media representations of education. His research interests are particularly on text and media representations of diverse childhoods and young people's political agencies, and he has published on queer, post-colonial and eco-activistic childhoods in children's literature, television and film. And Emma is a digital producer and creative business leader working at the immersive technology studio Cooperative Innovations. Emma is an accomplished leader in digital strategy and has worked in interactive design for nearly 20 years. She worked on a number of BAFTA-winning projects, including producing a game that was recreated by astronauts aboard in the International Space Station. Her focus on matter, the role on sector, is how much fun humans have when they interact with technology. Emma cares a lot about people at both ends of the process, the makers and the audiences. So Emma and Aneesh, nice that you're joining us. Are you here with us? Yes, I see you, and the screen is yours. Welcome to tell more about what you're working on.
Hi, thank you very much. Can you see my screen?
We see you, not your shared screen yet.
I see.
But I will let you know when it comes. Yes, we do. Now we see your
Brilliant.
slides.
Thank you very much. Okay, so today we'll be talking about a project that Emma and I and our colleague, Dr. Becky Parry, who unfortunately can't be here today, have all been working on over 2020, called Storyland. And what we'll do is we'll kind of share discussing these four kind of key points together. So how we work together from the stage of idea to implementation and presentation to an audience, how we aimed to use XR technology to reach and interact with the young audience, how we built bridges between academia and the tech industry, and finally the role of storytelling in XR to support children's play. So first of all, we'll just briefly introduce ourselves and the project, talk about, just as we were hearing in the last talk as well, how the pandemic had a major effect on what we had planned for the project and what we could then do with the project, and then talk through some of those elements as just listed. So I'll hand over to Emma to introduce herself first.
Hello, it's really nice to be invited to speak here. This is very exciting for a Saturday afternoon. My background is in game design and also e-learning. I've done a lot of work creating interactive things on screens for children, specifically as an audience, for a long time during my career. In the last 5 years, I've shifted from 2D screens to immersive and working with Cooperative Innovations. And a big part of that shift, it was really noticeable to me that there hasn't been a lot of work done in any kind of exploration into how young audiences can use this new tool. Obviously, the hardware isn't specifically designed for children, but we know that children are using the headset. So what can we learn and what can we think about that? So we had an opportunity come through a funding partner through York University called XR Stories, and we were lucky enough to get paired up with Sheffield University to start to explore this. So do you want to take over, Aneesh?
Yeah, so I'm a lecturer in education and digital literacies at the University of Sheffield, and my main work here is on a new program that started last year called Digital Literacies, Culture and Education, a master's program which is run by Becky Parry, and Becky and Emma kind of started this project together in early 2020, and then I joined in when I started at Sheffield in I think around May, June 2020. So what more to say about XR Stories? They're working on a few projects with Sheffield at the moment, including one called Storybox, another called Awesome Animals. So looking at use of AR and VR in children's cultural experiences and storytelling in particular. And yet this Storyland project, as Emma was saying, is specifically looking at younger children. So we initially were planning for children aged 8 to 12 and their use of VR headsets to tell stories. Emma, do you want to introduce the project?
Yeah, so we have at Cooperative Innovations, we have a set of tools that we've been using. We use Unreal Engine as the base of our development, and we've a set of tools that we've been using and developing over the last 5 or 6 years. One of them is inverse kinematic solver, which means that we can do almost full body avatar animation. We also have the ability to bring multiple people together into a digital space to create a social experience, plus to record any kind of performance. So we'd had this idea for we called it storytelling for a really long time for an application so that people could effectively do some puppetry, create stories, and then share those experiences. We've not specifically thought about it in terms of children. When this funding came up for the research, I was really interested in how children could potentially use this tool. When we first pitched the research, we had intended to run a number of small workshops with children between the ages of 12 and 15. After we received the funding, obviously the pandemic hit and we were no longer able to do anything in person. We pivoted and we were able to recruit a number of families, which we sent headsets out to. So I believe it was 12 families in the end. Each had a headset sent to their home. We almost had to recruit the parents as research assistants because they needed to help us to talk to the children about what this hardware is. And then Becky and Aneesh conducted a number of interviews over some Zoom panels. So what that did was it meant that siblings of the children were automatically included, which meant actually the age range of the children we were talking to dropped massively, which was really interesting, but it wasn't quite what we started out with the intention. So it meant that we had to start to think about different problems and different issues. So obviously children who are younger, their reading age is different, their understanding of the world is different. So we had to change the development of the product quite substantially, which meant that the period of time for the research got longer. But actually, in the end, what happened was the headsets were in the families' homes for over a year, which meant that we actually got really good information about how families are interacting with this new piece of hardware. So Storyland, in the development of the prototype, and it is just proof of concept. We knew that we wanted to be able to enable the children to tell a story. So we were trying to think about how we could do that easily within proof of concept, given all of our constraints and how much cost is involved with making things. We weren't going to be able to create a sandbox, something that was, you know, endless possibilities. So we decided to go with a 3-act structure, and adding in the constraint that we designed the first act. So we designed the first act, and then we wanted the children to respond to that first act and create a second act and a third act. So and as some kind of a response to the setup and then a conclusion. But as we'll see as we talk about it, there are different positives and negatives in those creative decisions as we went along. In terms of how we work together, what we had started out thinking was going to happen and what actually happened were two very different things, and we ended up providing a set of design documents to the group families and talking with the families about what they understood of those design documents, what they thought about our idea, and what came back from that was that the children were specifically interested in their agency in the story. They don't use language like that. They say it in terms of, I want to be the main character, or I want to take charge in the story. And the other thing that was really important to them was kind of that freedom of story making. So they weren't massively keen on us dictating what the beginning of the story was, but in the rest of the product, the tool, they have a lot of agency. So we kind of we made some decisions sort of in collaboration with them. One of the things that Aneesh did really early on in the process is he introduced me to the ladder of participation. So as an industry professional, I've done user research, but I don't think I've conducted user research in an academic way before. So it was really interesting to learn the proper academic way to do research. So on the ladder of participation, our young people and families were kind of like midway up. So we wanted them to be involved and we wanted to hear what they had to say. But ultimately, the technology constraints and the things that we need to consider needed to be a priority over what they wanted. So they were kind of like not on the top rung, like the second rung down. Do you want to speak a little bit about your part in this, Aneesh?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you were saying, Emma, it started off, the plan was just to have some sessions where we had all the children together in one room with the headsets. We introduced them to how to use it. We got them to try things out and take their responses from it. But having had to slow that down to, at least I think 10 months with the headsets, and we could then gain different kinds of ideas, data, information from them. So we asked the parents to with their consent, of course, to record them playing, to interview them about what they thought about it, just 1 or 2 minute videos. And we found out so much more about how they felt about other games on their Oculus headsets, and also what they thought about the games that Cooperative Innovations made. So they tried out a game that has already come out, Space Team, which they hugely enjoyed and is a collaborative game. So the children could play it together in groups. And then also alpha testing, Storyland. We could watch them playing it. We could see the recordings that came from their performance in it. And then also we could hear them talking about it with their siblings and parents. So it meant gaining a kind of unexpectedly different and more data than we'd anticipated. So there were things that we had wanted to do, such as a final beta test where the children introduced other children to the game and talked them through it. So then it would have been very high up the ladder of participation and involving the children in a much more kind of interactive way. But since we weren't allowed to have children in a room together like that, as you say, it couldn't be as participatory, but still going through that sort of iterative process of talking to them, finding out what they found interesting, working that into the making of the game, and then getting their feedback on what was produced in the game.
It was really useful to have the video from the parents, because conducting user testing with VR is complex in and of itself anyway, but being able to see the children, specifically one of the younger, much smaller participants, watching her fighting with the Oculus controllers, like they're just far too large for her hands, but she was so engaged and so completely excited and overwhelmed by the prospect of what was happening, that she was making it work. She was fiercely making it work, and we would only have known that through the video. We wouldn't have got that from. We received recordings of what was experienced in the VR experience, but having that additional perspective of what was happening in the physical world really helped us to understand. And I think given some more time, we would approach a lot of the UI completely differently. We would approach a lot of things differently, given more time. So originally, one of the things that we really wanted to explore was inclusivity. We really wanted to explore how and if the technology would speak to a different kind of audience. So we wondered, one of the things that we wondered was if by being in a virtual world, if that would change children's inhibitions. So generally, lots of children are not very inhibited in performance. They're quite happy to dance and play and share stories, but some children struggle with embarrassment or anxiety around performance. And we wondered if being very sheltered within a headset, if that might change their perceptions around that. Unfortunately, all of the nuances around that were completely kind of just had to be parked and put to one side because of the pandemic. The other things that we wanted to explore was identity. So we have the ability to make these avatars, and avatars is such an important part of embodiment and such an important part of personal identity. But because of our time restrictions and just the massive crunch that happened as a result of the pandemic, we had team out sick, we were all working remotely for the first time ever. We just, unfortunately, we never got to that part. So that's a part of the research that I really like to explore in more detail, especially given Aneesh's speciality. I don't know the correct terms, sorry. The other things that we wanted to explore was children's understanding of media worlds. So we know from Dr. Becky Parry's previous research, we know that children live very embodied experiences of children's story worlds. They mix and mingle brands and stories. So Minecraft and the Marvel Universe are one and the same to a lot of this audience. They're not separate brand or IP. They are all the same thing, and they can, in their play story, in their play, they will blend all of these things. So one of the things that we're really interested in with storytelling is, would that come through? And our hope for the product as we develop it is to include lots of different kinds of brands so that we can replicate how children play in the physical world. Do you want to speak a little to this, Aneesh?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I was very happy to be involved in early on in the project was just a literature review around what existing research is there around storytelling and virtual reality and inclusive design. And it turns out a lot of research shows that virtual reality can be a very supportive space for neurodivergent people, so autistic people. In particular, there's research by Gelsamini and Garzotto showing that virtual reality settings can be very supportive. It can be, according to the research, a very effective tool for visual learners. It can filter out external stimuli, which can be distracting. And exactly as Emma was saying, it can be individualizable and adaptable for people. It can be a space for self-expression. Other ways that design of games can be really inclusive for autistic people in particular is through creating collaborative contexts where people need to work together and communicate. This has been shown in a lot of research to be effective. And as I say, this is something that CI already does in its games, which our participants, we had a diverse range of participants, a neurodiverse range, a racially diverse range, a culturally diverse range. So even though it was a small group of participants, I think it was very kind of rich and meaningful data and ideas that we were getting from them about what they found effective and meaningful. And they did say in their responses to Space Team, for example, that they loved the elements of working together. So we can see that these are kind of playing out in the group of children that we were talking to. So before we gave the children the headsets, or the families rather, the headsets, they had to do just a preliminary survey to tell us about their previous experiences of virtual reality, as well as generally about their kind of media and digital lives. Marvel and Minecraft were absolutely favorites among them, but they were very diverse in their interests in literature, games, film, television, things like the Moomins, fantasy books. Obviously Harry Potter was a very popular one. But in fact, they didn't have a great deal of prior virtual reality experience. Some had experienced it in kind of museums or other kinds of non-school educational settings. One of them had a Google Cardboard, a Google Cardboard, and one had, through their parents' work at the university, played with a headset before. But for many of them, this was very new and a very kind of exciting, different experience to what they had before.
To the next slide.
Yeah.
I think for me, I really enjoyed the opportunity to work with proper researchers, whereas the research that we conduct, the industrial level research that we conduct tends to be designed specifically to get a response in terms of a product that already exists, whereas this research was a completely new approach for me, and I really appreciated it I feel like we as an organisation learned a lot from the university, and I kind of hope it went the other way. I don't know. I can't speak to that. What do you think, Aneesh?
Absolutely. So for me, I literally just started my job at Sheffield, and to be included in a project like this was wonderful. So it was already a surreal experience starting during a pandemic, and not being able to meet any of my colleagues face to face last year. But then for Becky to bring me in on the project and to gain this kind of experience of working with a tech company was so fascinating. And then later on in the project stages and during the master's program that Becky and I were teaching on, still are teaching on, we included some master's students in sort of smaller elements of the project. So they went through the whole research process of designing a project around a particular element of VR storytelling. So for example, one of them talked about avatar design and about risk-taking or rule-breaking in virtual reality spaces. And they approached me, Becky, Emma, and our participants to generate their own data around it. So it was an incredible experience for the students. And this is something that we'll be integrating into our program going forwards, connecting students to existing projects from researchers on the program. So that's myself, Becky Parry, Dr. Fiona Scott, Dr. Jess Bradley, as we're all already working on other projects around VR and AR. So hoping to include the students in these, give them that kind of real world research experience as well. So yeah, it was certainly an extremely meaningful experience from our end too.
And just to come full circle, what we found, what we discovered through the research were a number of things. One, children have the best way of explaining things. So one of the first sets of questions that the children were asked were, could you explain what virtual reality is? Can you, in your own words, what is it? And one of my absolute favorite quotes from that is, it's a screen on your face, which is incredibly accurate. And I think that they are such a savvy audience, really interested in how they understand and talk about their embodied experience of media through a VR headset. So we found that they were completely obsessed with the agency that they could get within story worlds. A lot of the first steps and things that happened, they were like, oh, okay, I understand this. I have control in this space. This is more than just playing a game on a flat screen. I can move around the space. I have full agency and embodiment. Yeah, I like how it feels and how you can interact with everything. I think that I know from being a child that was obsessed with computer games, I really wanted to interact with everything. I wanted to look in the drawers and open the cupboards, and I was always like frustrated by the lack of interaction in the story worlds that I was exploring as a child in the olden days. So yeah, that was the biggest takeaway, is the embodiment. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you saw, Aneesh?
Yeah, I mean, really just to kind of, oops, sorry, didn't mean to go to the next slide. Just to say more about this, yeah, just the children really loved how it felt to play like the sports games like Beat Saber. They loved moving their bodies around with virtual reality. One of them was a big fan of Elixir, where you don't have the handsets, you just move your hands, and that maps onto the virtual world. So that feeling of her actual movements were affecting that space was something she really enjoyed. So we, like I say, we surveyed them at the start. We had focus groups while they were playing with the headsets and other games. And then another kind of survey following up on a few months of getting used to playing in virtual reality, asking about what they would like for the game design, and certainly choice, freedom, agency, interactivity. These were the key things that they were looking for and said that they would enjoy. So following that, CI put forward a kind of prompt, an idea for what Act 1 of the story might be, and asked for their feedback on it. And the goal wasn't for them to write stories around this, just to see what their thoughts were about it, but their responses were very creative. They started immediately with kind of telling stories around this crack in the floor that appears on a very ordinary day. Emma, do you want to talk more about this stage of it?
Yeah, at this stage, we were trying to conceptualize how we could create some constraints, as I said before, and would they understand it? And what came back were 5 or 6 really brilliant ideas for what would happen next. So one of the children suggested that a cat was going to come out of the floor, and the cat would have superpowers, and the story went on. Like it wasn't just something came out and it was a bit boring. Like the story was detailed. There was a lot of information coming through, so we knew that we'd figured on something. Originally in my head, because I like alliteration and because I'm a little weird, it was going to be a kraken that came out of the crack, but after a lot of back and forth, we decided that that was going to be very scary and possibly not a good idea given the audience. So we landed on an octopus. I'm not sure how or why, but we landed on an octopus. So ultimately what happens is, at the beginning of the story, an octopus leaps out of the chest, and the narrator asks you what you think you need to do about it. The octopus has some interactivity, so there are some props, you can throw it a ball, it will catch and bounce the ball sometimes. You can throw it some hoops, and you're also given a laser pointer, and it reacts to the laser pointer much like a cat does. And the point is, it's something for them to focus on so that they can construct stories around it. What we saw as a result of this is some of the children just got lost in playing. They just got lost in playing with the octopus. They thought this was wonderful. One child was terrified by the octopus, and I regret my decisions because I didn't want to make any child scared. And some of the children actually constructed narratives. So one of the girls called it Fred, and created this whole narrative around the octopus, which was wonderful because that's exactly what we wanted to see. It worked. About 20% of the audience understood what was trying to be achieved and actually created some stories, but actually the rest of them just had a lot of fun. I think exploring, playing with the octopus and creating a bit of comedy in the world. I don't know, have we got the video to show, Aneesh? Is that later?
Welcome to Storyland. Sorry.
This is my pet Fred. Once upon a time, there's a lovely octopus, and the whale came bad, and he was very, very bad. So, hiya! Hiya! Doesn't like it. Bye bye, he said. Bye bye. Bye. Bye bye.
Thank you, Aneesh. Emma, we have our time running out. Do you have any ending comments?
I think that just about covers it. We're at the stage where we're looking for additional funding to carry on, or I'm interested in talking to partners that might want to work and collaborate with us on this. But yeah, that's it from us.
Yeah, and we've just got a little bit of extra funding at Sheffield to talk about avatar design with CI, so looking forward to arranging some workshops around that with the National Video Game Museum and a local company, Andrew and Eve, thinking about gender inclusion as well as other kinds of inclusive design. But thank you all very much, and looking forward to any questions or reflections from the audience.
Thank you, lovely. For now, we don't have any questions from the audience, but Emma, could you tell what kind of collaboration are you looking for? Do you look for creative partners to help you out to paint those old worlds and 3D animations, or?
Yeah, creative partners or story owners or brand owners. We're also working on a project called Curators, which has cultural storytelling, so museums and galleries, which will be a place that will be a cross between storytelling and education. So yeah, we're always interested in talking to other partners. We like to work collaboratively. It's built into the name of the business. Yeah.
And on what platform should we wait for that release? Or it's going to be only for UK? Or?
If as and when it will be on Oculus App Lab. We're also potentially going to release it on Steam. But it's still very early in development.
So thank you a lot sharing this, how so far you're doing a great job. And it's not the first project we're having today, a collaboration between academia, professors and practitioners. So thanks for your experience, it was super nice to have you here. Thank you for joining us this Saturday.